ensemble, the JCCC, and NCRR. We're very happy that you're all going to be able to make it today for our symposium, The Healing That Still Needs to Come. And I'm Richard Katsuda with NCRR, and it's so great to see you here. I know many of you went to go see have seen Tales of Clamor, and you know that there's a lot that you want to process, unpack, and all. And even those who have not seen it, we all know what happened after World War II was a deep hush that there was in the community where people didn't really talk about what happened. And so Tales of Clamor delves into why was that. And so we want to look at what happened in 1981, because that was a very momentous time for Japanese Americans, where we had the hearings of the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. And we had the hearings in Los Angeles. And I want to point out, if you get a chance, this article that I was able to dig up from Los Angeles Times, August 9, 1981, which talks about how this healing and catharsis for Japanese Americans, and it talks about the quiet Americans breaking their silence. So the commission hearings started this healing process, but of course it was only the beginning. So we're going to talk about what's happened since that time to Japanese Americans in the community, interactions with others, and some of the maybe healing that still needs to come, as we've talked about. So what we'll do is we're going to start first, going back to 1981, the Los Angeles Commission hearings, and our first speaker is Dr. Amy Iwasaki Mass, who will be on screen right now. So this is Dr. Amy Iwasaki Mass, 38 years ago.
I remembered feeling bad about being Japanese, of being even able to speak Japanese, of having Japanese parents. I felt ashamed because I loved my parent. I also loved America. I get goosebumps when I sing the Star Spangled Banner. I believed what our teachers taught us about what a great country America is. The pain, trauma, and stress of the incarceration experience was so overwhelming. We used the psychological defense mechanisms of repression, denial, and rationalization to keep us from facing the truth. The truth was that the government we trusted, the country we loved, the nation to which we had pledged loyalty, had betrayed us, had turned against us. Our natural human feelings of rage, fear, and helplessness were turned inward and buried. Experiencing and recognizing betrayal by a trusted source leads to a deep depression, a sense of shame, a sense of there must be something wrong with me. We were ashamed and humiliated. It was too painful for us to see that the government was not helping us, but was in fact against us. It was more tempting and easier to believe the propaganda and rationalizations of the American government in order to defend ourselves against the truth. Rather than facing the truth that America was being racist and unfair, we wanted to believe that America did not hate and reject us. This is the same psychological defense that beaten and abused children use. Abused children suffer from depression and shame. Mental health experts have found that abused children prefer to believe that they were bad rather than to believe that their parents are bad. Like the abused child who still wants his parents to love him and who hopes that by acting right he will be accepted, the Japanese Americans chose the cooperative, obedient, and quiet American facade to cope with an overtly hostile, racist America. By trying to prove that we were 110% super patriotic Americans, we hoped to be accepted. The problem is that acceptance by submission exacts a very high price. It is at the expense of the individual's sense of true self-worth. Though we may be seen by others as model Americans, we have paid a tremendous psychological price for this acceptance. On the surface, we do not look like former concentration camp victims, but we are still vulnerable. Our scars are permanent and deep.
We take in words of Dr. Mass from 1981. We're going to have Traci Ishigo come up, who is a therapist and trauma-informed meditation and yoga teacher, who's going to take us through an exercise to kind of get in the proper mood for cleansing and healing. Give it to Traci.
Thank you, Richard. I'm so glad that we're all gathered here today for this symposium, the healing that still needs to come. And as a young person, just really appreciative of all the energy and efforts of everybody in this room, including all of you who've chosen to carve out these 2 hours for you to do that work. So I'll invite you, if you would join me in just getting grounded for today. Maybe we can all begin feeling our feet on the earth, noticing if you could sit in a way that allows you to feel that your body is open to this moment today. Maybe feeling even dignified in your chair, supported by the earth, this center, this land that's right underneath all of us. And if it's comfortable for you, I invite you to either have a soft gaze out in front of you or maybe even close the eyes. Make this your moment. And perhaps we'll all take a collective full deep inhale in. Maybe let that out. Continue to just find your breath in. Noticing how you're right here, right now, on your exhales out. Maybe even checking in during this time, how your body is feeling, how you're breathing. Perhaps noticing if we can become curious about how our hearts are doing, how our minds are doing, just as you are. Taking another breath in, letting that one out. And as you continue to breathe just as you are, I invite you to honor why you came to this moment, this symposium today.
Great, thank you so much, Traci. So now I'm going to ask the panelists if you would come on up. And while they're doing that, those of you who do not have seats, you can go ahead and take their seats, all right? Okay, so we all got to hear Dr. Amy Iwasaki Mass as she was speaking before the commission at the 1981 LA Commission hearings. And so now we'll get to hear from her 2019. Dr. Mass is a professor emerita at Whittier College, having taught there for 25 years. She's been a social worker for 60 years, and she's worked quite a bit with Japanese Americans who've undergone traumatic experiences during World War II, and has made numerous presentations on those experiences. So we're very fortunate to have Dr. Mass here today.
It's really an honor to be here, and it was just really, Traci was asking us to be at our deeper self, and I think for me that happened during the performance. I just got so connected with the people who were speaking and acting. I wanted to say to each of them, I know you're right, yes. Anyway, let me go on and share with you my thoughts for today. And I need to apologize. I have a cochlear implant. I have a severe hearing disorder. And for some reason, my magnet is not working today, so I have to hold it on with my finger. Okay, my name is Amy Iwasaki Mass, and I was incarcerated at Heart Mountain, Wyoming from when I was 7 to 10 years old. Those of us who were in camp have had many different stories and ways of handling the camp experience. I would like to share with you today the 3 main factors that I believe shaped my response and reaction to the incarceration experience. First, I was very much influenced by the Japanese cultural values that were instilled in me by my parents and by people important to me in the Japanese community. 2 values that I would like to address today are the concepts of sonkei and meiyo. The concept of sonkei, a respect for authority, meant high regard for people in leadership positions. It was a natural response to directions from people like the President of the United States. Meiyo means honor. The importance of honor meant our individual actions reflected not only us as individuals. We were also raised to act honorably and not bring shame or discredit to our parents and our community. These are among a number of standards and customs that supported and sustained many of us Japanese Americans throughout the wartime experience, and I think you saw some of that with our actors. The psychological impact of the incarceration experience was a second big influence that shaped my behavior and actions throughout life. In the early years after camp, like many children my age, I said it was fun for me. The experiences I reported were the ones that were happy-going and easygoing and happy. I said that being in camp was fun. However, in my mid-30s, when I went through psychoanalysis, the carefree memories began to crumble. I cried and I cried as I got in touch with the feelings of fear, of rejection, of shame. I remembered how bad it felt to be Japanese. Japs were the enemy, and America seemed to think that I was the enemy too. As a clinician in the field of mental health, I tried to understand why we were able to rationalize and deny the injustice of the mass incarceration. I came to realize that the insult, the trauma, and the stress of being imprisoned were so overwhelming. We used psychological defense mechanisms like repression, denial, rationalization, to keep from facing the truth. The truth was we had been betrayed by the government that we had compliantly trusted. Experiencing and recognizing betrayal by a trusted source leads to a deep depression, a sense of shame and humiliation. We lost our core sense of meiyo, our very important sense of honor and worth. Stories like Nisei parents who refuse to talk about how camp really was can also be matched by stories where parents who, when they started telling their children about camp, they were unable to stop crying. Or stories of parents who denied camp being harmful and said, like me, it was fun. However, when they started really telling the stories, there were tears in their eyes. For many years, we heard of parents explaining their silence as a way of protecting their children from the truth of the camp experience. I believe these parents were protecting themselves as much as they were protecting their children. The third source that contributed to my speaking up about the injustice of incarceration were the years that I spent teaching at Whittier College. Whittier College was founded by the Quakers, and even though it is no longer a religious institution, it holds to Quaker values such as speaking one's conscience, pacifism, and social justice. Being raised to be a good Japanese American daughter who does not make waves, who avoids making trouble and sticking out like the proverbial nail who gets pounded down, I avoided direct personal confrontations, especially about racism. My mother always told me that people who were prejudiced against us was because they were ignorant and foolish, so I should just ignore them. That gave me a very convenient cover for my being chicken and afraid to speak up. However, by working closely with colleagues at Whittier who were social activists, who were fearless about speaking up for their values and beliefs, I could no longer continue with my timidity. I decided that whenever I was present, when someone made a racist comment or behaved in a racist way, I needed to speak up. I can tell you a variety of experiences when confronted with racism, where my so-called courage was accompanied with high anxiety, trembling fingers, knotted stomach, and heavy breathing. But I managed to live through it all, and in the process, I found myself better able to speak up for my convictions. The value of productions like Tales of Clamor and the symposia that we are having today provide us with opportunities to share and grow as we face and respond to the challenges that are created in our current government policies and practices. Thank you to the Pulp Project Ensemble and to NCRR for making this all possible for us.
Great. Thank you very much, for your truth and your insight. Next, we're going to have Jim Matsuoka. For those of you who've seen Tales of Clamor, Jim is a young man at the LACWRC hearing who pounded the table and said he would be heard no more by our government. So, here he is. So Jim was a longtime counselor at Cal State Long Beach in the Equal Opportunity Program. He's a founding member of NCR and founding member of Manzanar Committee. So without further ado, Jim Matsuoka.
Well, Richard told me that we have some like 7 minutes. But Richard, you will not hear me. This is a very difficult 7 minutes for me to deal with because the name of this session is Healing, but they wanted me to talk about rebellion. So I guess the only thing I can think of is rebellion is healing. You know? And so I'm talking about people that we did a lot of rebellion, so to speak. We had the in the camps, we had the Manzanar riots. We had the Heart Mountain Resistors of Conscience. And we have a speaker that's going to talk about the No-No boys, or No-No people, and Tula Lake. And then they really wanted me to touch on the juvenile rebellion, which is the yogurts. You know, these are people that, yogurt means dirty, you know. There's a different take on it. I've always accepted that, you know, yogurt is a bunch of, but lately there's been a review, a second look at it, and especially by Karen Ishizuka on the book Serve the People. she writes that, she says that the Asian American movement was born in 1968. It had been conceived a decade earlier, but not on any campus, but in the streets. Before there were campus radicals, there were street rebels, characterized by the same Asian American pride, the rage against the system, and nerve to confront it. They were hoodlums, delinquents, what we call yogures, and most of them, she says, were no doubt actual thugs. But some were in Hobsbawm's description of social bandits, pre-political insurgents who flouted authority and championed the masses against oppression, a la Robin Hood and Pancho Villa. So in the defense of the yogures, I said, wow, yeah, they're classified by some people as a Robin Hood group and Pancho Villa. And I know a lot of the older Nisei say, no. This man is smoking weed. But there's another story by Ellen Wu. She did a story. She says, the forgotten story of Japanese American zoot suiters in Chicago. You know, and apparently the federal government and the city of Chicago had this idea that they were going to take all the people in Chicago and kind of farm them out and assimilate them among the people, so we would kind of like disappear, you know, biologically, what happened. But apparently the zoot suiters made such a ruckus, you know, they made such a bad name for themselves that that just blew it up. So anyways, Ellen Wu was saying it's because of the zoot suiters, the yogures, this assimilation scheme kind of fell apart. So I'm saying, well, it can't be that bad, you know. What I know about the young people at that time, yeah, they were pretty, especially in Matsuoka, they were some tough people, you know. A lot of them were like the Terminal Island people, and they used to take the bottom of their corduroy pants, you know, so they would drape down, and they would see how dirty they could get it. You know? And they were tough kids. They would take on other people, you know, and coming out of camps, nothing changed, you know. When we came to a Little Tokyo, post-war, I call it Little Tokyo Relocation Center. You know, everybody was there, might as well just come right out of the camp and stood out of the camp. And they would have still been part of the internment center as far as I could tell. But the young people kind of took matters into their own hands and developed their own society. And I'm telling you, it wasn't too bad, you know. I remember things that, oh, we were all like, we had our own ways. Like, you know, we had to have our hair in a ducktail. You ever see that?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys don't know what a ducktail. Hey, you guys are. Some people on the west side. Some people on the west side had their cool bonnets. Now, who knows that? Oh, no one knows what the cool. Oh, there's someone. Oh yeah, you know that hair was straight up there. You know, it's from a movie called Quo Vadis, and there was a Roman legionnaire, and they had this plume of, you know, so these I guess West Side Yogurts had this Quo Vadis, and okay. We also had these muscle cars. They were great. I mean, you know, not these little butt butts you have nowadays. I had a Plymouth Valiant, and that thing had fins on it. You know, it looked like a Batmobile. Two antennas coming out the back, and oh, it was a good life in a way. You know, people say, "Hey, you just had a bad time." I said, "Hey, it wasn't too bad. We'd go to a dance." We'd go to a house party, and then we spent the rest of the night eating at a drive-in. We did, hey, for $1, you got a chicken basket with fries, and we can drive around anywhere because gas was only 27 cents a gallon. That sure beats what we got today. You know? And people did not mess with us, because on December 7th, I mean, where I came from, I mean, in December 7th, we used to wear Hinobara patch on us, you know? You know what that is? The rising sun? Yeah, and somebody wanted to take us on. I mean, it was on. But anyway. Wait, let me say one thing. I attribute to one person that I thought really did a lot for feminism. And that is Tura Satana. And she was in the movie Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. She was part of that. But the reason she was a badass. She was assaulted by some people. I mean, physically, sexually assaulted. She went and learned martial arts and came back and got revenge and neutered all these guys. You don't want to mess with her. The reason I bring her up is she was probably my first grader. She was in the first grade with me, I think, at Mensa. Wow. So I pay tribute to, she isn't around, to Tura Satana anyway. But anyway, what time is it?
No, I really do feel bad hurrying Jim around. And believe me, you heard the PG version. Jim can really, if you really want to get the story from Jim, you can. But next we're going to have Yukio Kawaratani, who he worked with the Community Redevelopment Agency in Los Angeles for 31 years. He's a member of the Little Tokyo Community Council and the Little Tokyo Historical Society. And he is too young to have actually filled out the loyalty questionnaire, but he knows from his own experience about what it did to his family, and he knows about the 75, 80 years after the war, where no-nos, renunciants have had to face the stigmatization within the community. And so Yukio is going to share his experiences on that.
Yes, my family was incarcerated and posted in Tule Lake. I was 10 years old going in and 14 coming out, so I remember it well. And also what followed. For over 70 years, former Tule Lake resistors have been stigmatized and labeled as those no-nos by the Japanese American community. It's time that the JCL finally admits that Tule Lake resistors have the courage and the right to protest America's concentration camps. Now, nearly 2 decades ago, the JCL, after 50 years, finally apologized to the Heart Mountain and other draft resistors for their principled stand during the war. But an apology to Tule Lake resistors continues to be its own no-no. Past JCL leaders and members and ex-GIs maintain long animosity towards Tule Lake resistors. They consider them dissidents, troublemakers, and draft dodgers. They recall that some JCL members were beaten up in the camps, and also that many of the Nisei GIs were killed or injured in the war. But now a new generation of JCL leaders and members predominate, so hopefully there's a hope for understanding and also healing. After the war, people often ask, what camp were you in? I never hesitated to say posted in Tule Lake, but I was always a bit angered by their even muted knowing responses. Oh. The Japanese American community has been brainwashed by the JCL and by the commonly used no-no slur, which implies wrongdoing. children and adults are often told, no, no, don't do that, when they are accused of doing something wrong. People don't understand that Tule Lake resistors were protesting their incarceration. They were the 10% that resisted and refused to fill out the questionnaire. Or some would not answer yes yet to questions 27 and 28. It had nothing to do with loyalty. Some men answering question 27 was like volunteering for the army. Some Issei parents even felt that answering yes to number 27 was giving up the only citizenship they had. You know, America had always denied them citizenship. And then there were some who answered yes, yes, if you give us back our rights and free our families. Now, these people didn't realize the severe consequences of their answers. The government labeled them all as disloyals and segregated them in the Tule Lake camp that was converted into a high-security prison for over 18,000 men, women, and children. Now, the JCL, with their super patriotism position during and soon after the war, were in strong opposition to Tule Lake resistors. They had urged their segregation from others in the 10 camps. They would not help ACL attorney Wayne Collins to stop deportation to Japan of over 5,000 renunciants and thousands of others in Department of Justice detention centers, and would not support Collins' heroic efforts to regain nearly all of their 5,000 citizenships. Now, ironically, JCL today strongly supports minority communities and immigrants in their resistance and protests against injustices, like bans against Muslims, detention centers, threatened and actual deportations, and separation of children. Why not support Tule Lake resistors and their protests against America's concentration camps? Now, a writer, Martha Nakagawa, wrote about, in the Rakushimpo, a long article about the last year's Tule Lake pilgrimage. She noted that Gary Maeda, who was then National JCL President, and also David Inoue, who was Executive Director, both attended. At the pilgrimage, Gary Maeda was asked about an apology to former Tule Lake resistors. His answer, that might be a good idea. David Inoue in the Pacific Citizen article said, pilgrimages are very vitally important to a community in healing the deep and persevering wounds of incarceration, especially true of Tule Lake, where the scars of injustices inflicted by our government were compounded by the ostracism many experienced from others in the Japanese American community. He also called for community healing. Although very thoughtful and sympathetic, words are quickly forgotten. Now, over 70 years later, it's finally the time for the JCL apology of all former Tule Lake inmates. The resistors are dead, and their descendants. Time to heal.
Now, our final speaker is Ayumi Nagata. And we're really fortunate because I think she's really going to broaden our perspectives as Japanese Americans. For Ayumi is a Shin Issei, born in Japan. Her parents were born in the aftermath of the war. And when she talked to her parents, she said that they really didn't talk about what happened after the war because people were so busy trying to rebuild Japan and all the devastation there. And so she, at the same time, while growing up, I think she felt this kind of yearning to find out more about what happened to her grandparents in Japan during World War II. And about 3 months ago, she started to learn more from one of her grandfathers in Japan. And she'll tell you about what happened. She started drawing to kind of depict those experiences. So I'll let Ayumi talk about that.
I actually shared this experience at the Go for Work Center a couple of months ago, and that's what compelled me to ask my parents about what really happened in my family. And I'm 36 years old now. It's the first time our family's really talked about it, and we've never heard first-hand accounts story, so it was really interesting that it never occurred to me to ask, and it never occurred to anybody to share the story. So this isn't a slideshow from
Oh, my bad.
Okay, so I spent my elementary school years in Japan. We were very much a 1990s nuclear family. There was my parents, myself, and the suburbs, far away from any relatives. And much like many Japanese school children, what I learned and knew of the war came from Barefoot Gen, which is a comic book series of a pacifist account of the bombing of Hiroshima and its aftermath. And every summer, the animated movie Grave of the Fireflies, a tale of siblings who survived the war, came on TV. It is heart-wrenching and crushing in its themes. In the 6th grade, we had a field trip to Nagasaki Peace Park, and from this learning experience, what was so pronounced was that the Japanese really suffered during the war. And it wasn't until years later that we came to the US that my parents really learned for the first time they had never heard of Korean comfort women or the other atrocities that were also committed by Japan. So what I heard growing up was that I vaguely knew that my paternal grandfather was sent off to war. And some of the stories I had heard was that they had lived relatively close to Hiroshima, so they witnessed a mushroom cloud when the bomb was dropped. And until recently, I thought my grandfather was a kamikaze pilot. And my cousin who grew up with my grandfather had only one story to tell, which was that my grandfather used to ice skate in the frozen lakes while we were stationed in China. So I just watched Tales of Clamor, so I kind of recognized that the fun stories coming out, and I noticed a lot of similarities. So what actually happened was, and this is an account that was told by my father's neighbor growing up. My grandfather was in the Japanese Imperial Army. He was en route to Hiroshima when his ship was attacked by US forces. And clinging onto a piece of plank, he was finally rescued by the Japanese. It is highly unlikely that he would have survived had he landed on Hiroshima, as the majority of the Japanese were killed in action or taken as prisoners during the infamous Battle of Hiroshima. I later learned that this is more likely, I pictured a battleship, but I think what it really was more a boat that was made out of planks, and you could only fit one person. And I think a lot of teenage boys were sent off in these, and I think that was what happened. And upon rescue, my grandfather was brought over to Odasawa Island, also known as the Galapagos of the East. It's about 1,000 kilometers from Tokyo, and as the name suggests, the island is known for its biodiversity. It is said that my grandfather was so impressed by the flora and fauna of the island and talked about its beauty many times. In the meantime that my grandfather was away at war, my paternal grandmother lost her first husband in the war. Where and how remains unknown, and I did not learn of this until very recently. By 1945, Japan surrendered. In 1947, Japan signed its new constitution, including Article 9, outlawing war as a means to settle international disputes. After the war, my widowed grandmother and grandfather married and had 5 children, including my father. Despite its proximity to Hiroshima and having his own parents experience war, my father recalls very little of the aftermath of war. They rode the wave of tremendous economic prosperity. Of this, my dad notes, everyone was singularly focused on economic development. There was little attention paid to the war because everyone was just trying to make things work. Everyone was preoccupied with immediate concerns of work and family. It was not a time of abundance, but a hyper-focused energy on growth. No one in our family has ever directly heard of my grandfather's account of war. A distinct memory of my father has of his father is my grandfather dressed in a crisp kimono after a long day in the fields, gazing at his ikebana arrangements. My grandfather would be contemplating and admiring his arrangements quietly into the night. It is a beautiful, quiet image. I imagine that this was his private time to reflect on many things, including his war experiences. And I wonder more than ever if he ever thought that Japan would contemplate amending the Constitution to once again consider engaging in war. We will never know.
So thank you, Ayumi, for broadening our horizon, thinking about healing. And I think as we're thinking about this, what we'd like to do finally is take us back to 1981. And I know some of you are like me, who grew up after the war. We didn't directly experience the camp. And there are lots of psychological effects that we felt as well, the way our parents raised us and all. And so finally we're going to show a clip of Dr. Akemi Kikumura, who will be talking about some of those experiences.
My name is Akemi Kikumura. I'm an anthropologist teaching courses in anthropology and ethnic studies at the University of Southern California. While teaching courses, especially in Asian American studies, I've had the opportunity to talk, interact with hundreds of Sansei students, and it is on their behalf that I'd like to testify here today. My testimony is based primarily on student term papers, observations in the classroom, and especially during group discussions. One of the topics that receives a great amount of interest and attention in the term papers and classroom discussions is the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II and the impact it has had on their own lives and their parents. A repeated theme that many of the Sansei students have encountered is the reluctance on the part of their Nisei parents to discuss that part of their lives with their children. One 19-year-old female student said, when I asked my parents about the camp, all they told me was that they were in Poston, Arizona. When I pressed them further, my dad scooted the issue and said, I just want you to study hard and make something of yourself. Then he went back to reading his paper. Another female Sansei who had asked her parents about the wartime internment had this to say about her inquiry. My father said, go ask your mother. When I asked my mom, she was short with me. She said, I blocked that whole experience out of my mind, and I think it's just as well that you do the same. When I continued to ask questions, she dismissed me with, I can't remember. One student offered her reason as to why many Nisei parents have been unwilling to reveal the whole truth to their children. She said, with their silence, our parents tried to protect us from the pain. They thought that by doing so, it would help to make us better Americans, and that knowledge of this experience would only hinder our chances for achievement. However, another Sansei male revealed how this rationale could actually create additional stress and strain for the offspring and obstruct a better understanding between parent and child. He confessed, I wish my father would have talked to me much sooner about his struggles. After the war, he had to take care of my grandmother and 5 younger sisters and brothers. His oldest brother joined the army and got killed, and after that, my grandmother, she went crazy, couldn't get over his death. I can't imagine. He was only my age at that time, 19. If I had talked to him much sooner, then maybe I could have understood why he raised me the way he did. Up to now, I feel like I've been walking a tightrope. My parents harangued me, don't make waves, don't talk back, don't do anything to embarrass us, don't come home with anything less than an A. I feel like I've always had someone looking over my shoulder, watching every move I make, and I'm afraid to fall because if I do, the whole family will come tumbling down with me. I guess my father had to suffer and work so hard to achieve what we have today that he doesn't want me to go and destroy it all. Another student who was also successful at getting her parents to talk about the wartime experiences found the discussion to be quite insightful. She remarked, my father, he's a gardener, has been one for as long as I know. Never thought he aspired to be anything more. But I discovered that he wanted to be an engineer. And when war broke out and he was incarcerated, he had to quit school. He never did finish. All the students agree that they do not have to face as much overt racism and discrimination as their East State parents and East State grandparents had, but the majority also feel that they still have to confront it in many different guises. A Sansei male from Hawaii hesitantly told the class about a case of racism that he had to face on a recent weekend skirmish. He said, I was waiting in the car while my friend went into a liquor store to buy some beer, and two Haole, that is Caucasian guys, came up to the car and started slanting their eyes and calling me Jap. They kept jeering at me and challenging me to fight, but I wasn't about to go out and fight because they were huge 6-foot bruisers that looked like they belonged to the varsity football team. Later, I was angry that I didn't fight back. I was depressed because in Hawaii I've never been treated like that. I felt alienated from everybody, frustrated, lonely. I wanted to go back home. Members of this commission, I would like to conclude this testimony by urging you to be fully aware of the far-reaching impact that the concentration camps have had and will continue to have on our youth, unless with your help we could overturn the legal basis of the evacuation order, ensure direct individual monetary compensation to those interned or their heirs of at least $25,000, and launch a nationwide educational process whereby our children will learn the truth in the media, in the schools, and in our homes. May I remind you that feelings of rejection, alienation, inferiority, insecurity, anxiety are feelings that are much too familiar to our Sansei youth. As one student stated in her term paper, the shame and humiliation that my parents suffered were passed on to me, and although I never saw barbed wire, tasted mess hall food, or lived in cramped barracks, my mind is still imprisoned from that experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wow. From these powerful commission hearing clips, from all the experiences, insights from our panelists, and we have I'm sure you have a lot of feelings, things kind of bubbling up in your mind and maybe inside of you. So what we want to do, part of the reason we really want to kind of keep everyone to a certain amount of time is we want to allow you, the audience, to have ample time to think about things, process, to ask questions, to share your feelings that you might be having now. And later on, Traci Kiriyama will be leading a response to have people be able to talk to each other. But for now, I want to see, are there questions that, or any kinds of feelings that you want to share at this moment?
Oh gosh. Are we being quiet again? I could speak loudly.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask Yukio to share a little bit about your family, because I heard you at Tule Lake, and you're speaking with such anger that it comes from somewhere, and your own family's experience. What did your family go through that you want to you could tell us?
Well, first of all, I came from a family of 11. Counting my parents. I had 5 older brothers, and 3 of them ended up in the U.S. Army. 8 of us ended up in Tule Lake. My father and 2 of my other brothers ended up in Department of Justice detention centers, so I was there left alone with my mother and 3 sisters. My my father was so angry by the whole thing that even though Wayne Collins was able to stop the deportations of everybody, and said only those who chose to go, but my father chose to go, and he took 2 of my brothers. So, you know, it had a major effect on my family, and so, you know, so the anger's there. But what has angered me too has been the ongoing treating us no-nos like, you know, we were the bad guys, and that has always angered me.
Did any of the other panelists want to speak to that? Oh, Susan, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, so I'm a Sansei and I was involved in the redress movement. I also went to the hearings but in San Francisco. And I just wanted to say that hearing about the resistors and hearing about the no-nos and hearing about all the people who rebelled against that kind of social and political repression was very deeply inspiring to Sansei. And I think learning about it was part of our healing because it's so devastating to be told that you're part of a people that are just, you know, caterpillars, you know, or worms. And, you know, I think learning about the people that stood up was so healing for many, many Sansei. It was very inspiring and invigorating. And I just want to say that.
Anything else anyone want to share? If not at this moment, maybe I'll just turn it over to Traci Kato Kiriyama. You all know she's co-creator of Tales of Clamor.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our speakers. It's a great honor to share this space with you and all of you here. So we knew that this whole day and watching some testimonies and hearing all of these stories and memories and thoughts from our panelists would fill us up. And in the process of healing, we think that it's not enough to just absorb, right? And to just take in, which we've done a lot now of, yes? So what we're gonna do is spend some time in the practice of healing, which includes listening and being heard, right? So we want to make sure that everybody in this room has a chance to listen and to be heard. So what we're gonna do is ask you we're gonna do some chair shuffling right now, and then I will explain more, but let's do the chair shuffling first. So what I'd like you to do is get into pods of 2 to 3 maximum. No more than 3 people in your group. If you can, try to include somebody near you who you don't know, actually. So let's do that. Let's do a chair shift right now. I'm going to move to letter A. Letter A is now going to speak, share your thoughts, where you're at, what brought you here today, what things you're curious about, what stories you might not know, what questions you might ask next. 7 minutes, and go. All right, so letter B person, you're going to share, and the other 2 are going to listen. Okay, go ahead. Thank you so much. Great, one more time. In. Out. Wonderful. Okay, how was that, everyone? Good, love, amazing, yes. I super appreciated how much we all talked about our fathers. And the things that they leave with us, right? And the questions that we never asked, but that we will find in other ways, yeah. All right, so just anyone want to share something that, you know, resonated with you, something that you heard, something that made you think of a question you might ask later? Don't be shy.
Talk about breathing silence.
As we're thinking about silence and Clamor, yes, thank you.
What struck me the most is how our friend here said the parents just wanted her to get her education, don't get involved in anything, don't speak up. And I found how much this part of her culture parallels what went on in my own home. I'm not Asian. My parents are mixed race, European, African, and they were always afraid. Don't go out in public and clown and embarrass us. Stay out of trouble, don't argue with anybody. If you see someone do something bad, get away from there, don't say anything. And it's just so similar and so painful to hear, because I never talked so much about how it was in my family, but now I'm hearing the stark parallel. And it's, I don't respond to sadness by crying. I just get really down and dark.
Thank you for sharing. One thought that I have for you, and that also came up as we were talking, of the importance of writing out these stories and memories before we lose them, but also as a way to just see the reflection of our stories and memories, and through that practice also share, right, and begin our own process of healing. So I hope, even though they are hard to sometimes get out, that I want to encourage you and this whole room to write out stories and memories so that you can share them with somebody, right? And then extend sort of your own experience with others. Because I think that we always see connections, like exactly what you're saying, these awesome connections between our own unique experience and someone else's unique experience. But unless we share it, we don't understand that we even have that connection in the first place. So I really thank you for sharing that and accepting that connection and seeing that connection. Thank you very much. All right. Who else would like to share? Yes.
I want to add on to this because, Bonnie is obviously not Japanese American. There's a lot that we have in common in terms of sharing experiences of trauma in our families, and that whole healing process of trying to understand that, and to be able to talk about it, being one of the first steps, like today, and that's why, Bonnie really liked today, because it gives us the opportunity to do that, and that's one step forward. But anyway, I'm gonna cry.
Thank you for tears. Thank you so much. Right? We connect and we cry together.
The similarities are very profound in terms of how people deal with trauma and how to heal from that. So
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah. We all have our own path and paces too, right? But yeah, just seeing the connection that you have despite the difference, right? So it's great. Thank you. Whom else? Yes.
Hi, I'm a sensei and a baby boomer. So it was interesting to speak to Keiko, who's a psychologist and works with sensei's where their parents, like my father, had gone through the camps. In my case, my father was in Kirsten, Arizona. My mother was also in UK, but not in the camps. And so I have been involved in going to allegiance and tales of Clamor, doing things like this, because I'm trying to understand the pain that my father went through in the camps because he didn't talk about it, and also how that contributed to his becoming the father that he did to me and my siblings. But hearing from Keiko and some of the other psychologists that they're dealing with other JAs whose parents have gone through the camps and how it contributed to their issues as the Sanseis became adults. So it helped me to see that my situation is not unique. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's profound. Yeah, thank you. Who else would like to share? Kathy? Oh.
Okay. Our group was actually pretty different in many ways. And it reminded me that I think what we all did share was the regret and not asking more questions and the stories that we won't hear and things like that. But, even if they were different and, one of our members here said he couldn't really relate to this, feeling different or feeling, trauma at the camp. And it reminds me of like many of my relatives who missed the hearings and things like that. And it depends on the time that you came, maybe of age too. So we're kind of looking at, within our community, we have different slices of ages and generations and what we were exposed to. So that was kind of interesting in that way.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, and again, Naomi Hirahara and I co-facilitated this workshop called Recording Memories, and so what we always really try to tell folks is, because I personally too, I relate to that so much. I carry a ton of regret over the things that I never asked my father, and I'm losing so much family now. And one thing that I remember vividly, Naomi saying that her brother did before their father passed. He just, with his phone, turned on the recorder on his phone for 10 minutes and just captured their dad talking. And she was not able to listen to it later, but just knowing that it's there, that she could listen to his voice for 10 minutes, right? So I'm going to totally encourage that. Like, it doesn't take much to just hit record. It doesn't have to be an oral history that lasts for 3 hours with cameras and lighting. It does not have to be that intense. It can be like on their birthday, right? 10 minutes, just hit record. Let them talk story, okay? We'll plant that seed. Okay, and yes.
Kathy. I'm Chinese American, and one of the things that from our discussion here that came through was that just seeing how we all have experienced generational trauma that we talked about not only our parents, but also their parents and their parents. And in those stories, some of the stories that we know of, that they were in those situations doing the best that they knew how to at that time. And they made certain decisions that when we look at now, we're like, why did you do this? But at the time, that was the best they were able to do. And how it really felt to me that one thing we talked about was it evoked terror, the sense of terror, the lack of safety, and displacement can cause, shame can cause, and how those really so fundamental feelings that you're not enough because you don't have a place in this world, not only individually but collectively as a people. That really is very difficult to not be overwhelmed by. And that a response of silence is common. I know that in my own experience in the Chinese culture. And that I too feel a sense of regret of not talking to my parents about their experiences in mental health. But feeling growing up that lack of security, and how do we achieve security by education, which is wonderful, but also at the same time, how do we achieve security by controlling ourselves and controlling others. So there's a lot more. But I'm still processing this.
Yeah.
Trying not to be like overwhelmed by all the different feelings.
Yeah.
In particular, anger, and also in particular, part of when you talk about your Buddhist kind of teachings of compassion to other people, and about how sometimes we lose ourselves in that equation, that compassion for ourselves is not part of that equation. And what happens when compassion towards someone else and compassion to yourself may possibly be in conflict? So how do we deal with that?
Thanks. That's a lot. That's great stuff. Oh, wow, you're going to have amazing conversations later with that. I want to take all of that, that feeling and that resonance that we have with everything you said, and actually loop back around to something that I think it was Susan who said at the beginning, before we just started out this process as a group, that we gain a lot of inspiration also with situations of resistance, people who are examples of the fight, right? And I'm a super optimistic, pissed off person. Like, I'm like the most pissed optimist. And, but I will never let go of my anger. I want to utilize that. And so I want to give thanks again to all the folks who came and spoke about resistance and speaking out. And I want us, I wish we had more time, but since we don't, and some of us castmates, we need to go and eat and rest. So, because we have a show at 8 o'clock. And what I want to do though is ask you all to please walk through your day and think about a pledge that you will make to the world, to community. Renew your pledges, continue them, build upon them. Right? So that we can be that clamor, we can be that resistance, and utilize our anger and our regret and our pain, right? To show up for all the people who really need us right now. We have so much family that really needs us right now, right? And there are organizations to support, there are things to get involved with. Look for Nikkei progressives, look for Vigilant Love, look for Lisa Okamoto, the amazing work that she's doing with attorneys to support people in detention centers. Ask us, like let's connect, let's keep building, let's keep going. So, can we please give a huge thank you to our panelists? Thanks everybody.
So as Tracy said, thank you everyone for sharing with each other, and please continue discussions and the healing, and have safe travels home. Or if you're going to go see the performance, enjoy the performance.